The night my best friend asked me to marry her, she was standing in my kitchen with tears running down her face, holding a plane ticket in one hand and a 90-day contract in the other. I thought she was joking. Then she whispered, "Marry me for 90 days so I don't have to move away." And in that moment, I had no idea that the strangest favor anyone had ever asked of me would become the greatest love story of my life. Before we begin, if you believe some people come into our lives for a reason, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the possibility that love can find us when we least expect it, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need them more than you know. My name was Nathan, and for almost 10 years, Claire had been the one person I could always count on. We met in college after she accidentally spilled coffee all over my final project. Instead of getting angry, I laughed, and somehow that embarrassing moment became the beginning of a friendship that survived graduation, broken relationships, bad jobs, family problems, and all the ordinary storms life throws at people. We knew each other's favorite songs, fears, habits, and secrets. The only thing we never talked about was the possibility of becoming something more. Claire had always been the brave one. She was the person who encouraged everyone else to chase their dreams while quietly putting her own dreams aside. But that evening, she looked nothing like the confident woman I knew. Her father had accepted a job overseas, and her mother had been struggling with serious financial problems. Claire had been offered a position in another state that would allow her to help her family, but there was one painful condition. She had to move within 2 weeks. The problem was that Claire had spent years caring for her younger brother, Daniel, who had finally started college nearby. Moving meant leaving him behind. Staying meant losing the job that could help her family survive. She had spent weeks trying to find another solution, and then she discovered something she thought might work. The company was willing to delay her relocation if she could prove she had strong personal and financial reasons to remain in town for 90 days. She looked at me with trembling hands and explained that if she got married, she could qualify for a temporary housing arrangement connected to her new position and buy herself 3 months to settle her brother's situation. Then came the question that changed everything. She asked me to marry her. Not because she loved me, she said. Not because she wanted a real marriage. Just 90 days. A legal arrangement. A favor between best friends. After that, we would quietly separate and go back to normal. I should have said no. Every sensible part of me screamed that pretending to be married to the woman I had secretly loved for years was the worst idea imaginable. But Claire was crying, and I knew why. She wasn't trying to trap me. She was terrified of losing her family and being forced into a decision she wasn't ready to make. So I said yes. Our wedding was tiny. There were no flowers, no expensive clothes, and no romantic promises. We signed papers at a courthouse while Daniel stood beside us, trying desperately not to smile. Claire wore a simple blue dress, and when she looked at me afterward, she whispered that she owed me everything. I smiled and told her she didn't owe me anything. What I didn't tell her was that I would have done almost anything to keep her from walking out of my life. The first few weeks were awkward. We moved into my small apartment because it was closer to Daniel's college. We created rules. No jealousy. No expectations. No pretending when we were alone. And most importantly, no falling in love. That last rule lasted about 3 days. I began noticing little things I had somehow overlooked during our friendship. Claire would hum quietly while cooking. She always left one light on in the hallway because she hated completely dark rooms. When she was worried, she twisted the ring on her finger. At night, she would sometimes fall asleep on the couch while waiting for me to come home, and I would carefully place a blanket over her without waking her. One rainy evening, I came home exhausted after losing an important client at work. I found Claire sitting at the kitchen table with 2 bowls of soup. She had waited for me. She didn't ask whether I had succeeded or failed. She simply pushed one bowl toward me and said she knew I needed it. For the first time, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was falling in love with my wife. But I kept it to myself because I knew the 90 days had an expiration date. As the weeks passed, Claire's situation improved. Daniel found a part-time job and secured financial aid for the next semester. Her mother finally found stable work. The company even offered Claire a permanent local position, meaning she no longer needed the temporary arrangement. I thought that would make her happy. Instead, she became distant. One night, I found her sitting on the balcony with tears in her eyes. She told me everything had worked out. She didn't have to move anymore. She could stay. Then she looked at me and said the words I had been secretly dreading. Our 90 days are almost over. I nodded, pretending it didn't hurt. She handed me the divorce papers the next morning. I signed them without arguing. Claire stared at me for several seconds, almost as if she wanted me to stop her. But I couldn't. I had promised her freedom, and loving someone sometimes means refusing to hold them captive with your feelings. That night, she packed a suitcase and went to stay with her mother. For the first time in 10 years, my best friend wasn't there. The apartment became painfully quiet. 3 days passed. Then 5. On the 7th evening, someone knocked on my door. It was Claire. She stood there holding the divorce papers, but they were torn in half. I couldn't speak. She walked inside, placed the pieces on the table, and began crying. She told me that after leaving, she had spent every night remembering our 90 days. She remembered the soup, the rainy evenings, the arguments over what movie to watch, the way I always checked that she had reached home safely, and the way I never once asked her to stay when I could have. Then she finally understood why. She had spent 10 years calling me her best friend because she was afraid that admitting she loved me might destroy the friendship. She said the 90-day marriage had not created love. It had simply given us permission to finally see the love that had been there all along. I stood frozen as she came closer and whispered that she didn't want 90 days anymore. She wanted a lifetime. I asked her if she was certain, because this time there would be no contract, no deadline, and no pretending. She smiled through her tears and said that for the first time in her life, she was completely certain. I took her hand. And that was how our 90-day marriage became a real marriage. A year later, we returned to the same courthouse where we had signed those papers. This time, there were flowers. Daniel was there, laughing. Claire's mother cried through the entire ceremony. We exchanged new rings and made the promises we had been too afraid to make the first time. Sometimes I think about that desperate night when Claire walked into my kitchen with a plane ticket and asked me to marry her for 90 days. I thought I was helping my best friend avoid moving away. I never realized she was actually bringing me closer to the woman I was meant to spend my life with. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and scroll away. Like the video, share it with someone who believes that real love can grow from friendship, sacrifice, and patience, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Sometimes one small act of kindness can change 2 lives forever. And before the story ends, I want you to leave a special comment. Some love stories begin with friendship. Write those words below if you believe the people meant for us sometimes stand beside us for years before we finally realize how important they are. Because Claire once asked me for 90 days. She thought she was asking for enough time to keep her life from falling apart. But those 90 days gave us something neither of us had ever expected, the courage to stop being afraid of what we already felt. And sometimes, the greatest love story doesn't begin with 2 strangers falling in love. Sometimes, it begins with 2 best friends finally realizing they never stopped.